are the games that deserve modern remakes. 25 incredible video games that deserve remakes. 10 games/series that deserve a remake or remaster. Classic video games that need remakes. 10 video game remakes we actually need. 10 video game remakes that need next-gen remakes.
Nah, remake culture is dumb, and you guys should stop asking for them. I want to make something clear before. My thesis here is no game needs a remake, not no remake should be made ever. And what do I mean by that? Well, I guess you have to stay here and figure that out. My motivation to talk about this wasn't sparked by the abundance of remakes necessarily. I myself am a huge fan of the Resident Evil, Dead Space, Ocarina of Time, not Majora, and of course the new Replicant remakes. But no, what sparked this is how often I see people on the internet saying things like, "Oh man, we really need a remake of The Legend of Zelda. It's such an important game, it's such a shame it's stuck as an NES game." And this seems to be a commonly shared sentiment amongst fans, which I can't help but believe comes from a deep-rooted source of fear of trying unfamiliar things and wanting every experience to be modern. It's looking back at the past as an era of limitations instead of innovation, and that's what I mean by remake culture. Consoles in 30 years may or may not be hundreds of times more powerful than the ones we have now. Does that mean Cyberpunk 2077 Remake is happening? And look, I know that tech advances come with diminishing returns. It's the same reason why a game from 15 years ago isn't considered retro when in 2010 a game from 1995 was. As art evolves, rules are made on how or how not to do something, and innovations become standard. What once was mind-blowing is now the bare minimum. Fully 3D worlds, controllable cameras, third-person aiming, even things as basic as using the triggers to shoot didn't become standard until well into the PS2 generation. And innovation is great. The fact that nowadays you can pick up a controller and instantly know how your character should control is awesome. But having that sort of familiarity nowadays has conditioned gamers to want it with everything. If you try to play an older game, say Ocarina of Time, you will definitely be confused. There's no second stick to move your camera, you have these weird yellow buttons to use your items, you control your view by pressing a trigger to center the camera behind you, and this can take a bit to get used to. Someone used to modern games may wish for a remake because they just can't get into this old game. And look, I'm not here to police what and how you enjoy it, but if you're not willing to get into an older game with the understanding that it's a product of its time, I question if you're really interested in it or the idea of it. Video games are art, they say, but then refuse to engage with them if they have outdated graphics, archaic mechanics, or anything mildly tedious. Any rough edge is something to be polished off so we can finally have an ideal, perfected version of it. But art is not about perfection, it reflects the historical, social, and technological context it was made in. Think about an older movie, and I mean an old movie. I'm talking 50 years plus. Let's say the original Planet of the Apes. If you watch it now, you'll probably think the apes look silly, the plot is simple, and maybe even find some of its themes too in your face.
But certain young cynics have chosen to study man, perverted scientists who advance an insidious theory called evolution.
But this was a movie released in 1968, it's just not fair to hold it to modern standards. You need to understand the context in which it was made to appreciate why it meant so much at the time, how it compares to movies released around the same time, and how it has influenced movies after it. This mentality that we need to modernize it is what led to the terrible Burden remake, a movie that quickly became technologically outdated anyway. It wasn't until they did something new with the modern saga that the franchise regained the trust of the public. Not by trying to replace the original, but by building upon it, and it's the exact same case for video games. I understand why remakes are made. A lot of the time it can make a lot of sense. If a franchise has been dormant for too long and neither the fans nor the IP holders have faith in it, a good remake can be an effective lower stake way to reel older fans back in and also attract new players who are curious about this game being brought back. Sometimes a remake can bring a franchise back to the public eye, and if it gets good reviews and sells well enough, that can be that push the franchise needs to become mainstay again. A remake is also useful when it comes to showcasing just how more powerful your new hardware is. Showing scenes and places people are already familiar with, but they just look so much better now thanks to the new technology. Look at how much better this older game looks on this console, and it's portable too? That can be an incredibly effective way of convincing people that the new consoles are worth it. So even when I don't think that making this is necessary from an artistic point of view, I can see and appreciate them for how useful it can be to make people more interested in a certain franchise. Crash Bandicoot 4? That implies I may need some prior knowledge. Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy? Now that is a phase that screams accessible. And accessibility is the point that a lot of people will make when talking about why a game needs a remake, and I can see that argument. Accessibility options are awesome. The more people who can enjoy this medium to the fullest, the better. However, we really need to define what you mean by accessibility, because to me, accessibility means everyone can play. Everyone can pick up a controller and perform all the actions that the game will require of them. But accessibility does not mean making a game everyone will enjoy. Final Fantasy VII, a turn-based RPG, was remade as an action RPG, a genre that is way more immediately understood by the general public. Someone who plays this game may say, I really wanted to play FF7 because I've heard the story is amazing, but I just hate turn-based combat. And again, you can like what you like, but when you want the game you're interested in to be a different game so you feel compelled to play it, at that point you have two options. You can either try getting out of your comfort zone and take a chance on a gameplay style you're unsure you'll like, or just play something else. You don't have to play that game. I've been there. I was a turn-based RPG hater. I did not understand them at all, and I thought it was a boring and outdated gameplay style. But a lot of the times, in order to enjoy a genre you hate, you can find that one game that can be an awesome entry point and finally make it all click. For me, it was actually Fire Emblem. Since I was a kid, I liked chess, and this seemed like a cool chess game with cool characters, and then I realized, wait a minute, I'm playing a turn-based strategy RPG. I guess that means I like strategy games. It's like a first bisexual awakening. And that opened me up to being more open of turn-based RPG games. So if you're really curious about a game like that, maybe just give that game a shot with an open mind, and you could be surprised at how much you enjoy these old-school mechanics. Same old-school mechanics that were made in conjunction with that awesome story. What makes gaming work as a storytelling medium is how the gameplay complements the narrative. A good story in a game should be inseparable from the gameplay since that is the medium in which it's told, and that's why I actually think Final Fantasy VII Remake is a very smart move. Full disclosure, I haven't played this game, but from what I understand is that it fools you into expecting a straight retelling of the original game, but at some point it diverts drastically from the original story. And in that case, having a different gameplay and combat system makes a lot of sense, because it's not trying to be a more mainstream accessible version of the same story, it's its own story that plays with your expectations of something familiar. And this is why there's a very important distinction to make. This is a conversation you know and love, remakes versus remasters versus re-releases. If you really want to experience that original game with some quality of life improvements maybe, what you really should be asking for is for a remaster, a new release of the game with some enhancements. And I'm all for it. Yes, the original framerate of Majora's Mask is tied to its coding to the point that the music was made to sync with the lag of the game in some cutscenes, but having a more stable framerate is objectively better for the experience. Same for bottom mapping, widescreen, higher resolutions, and better textures. Remember, I'm the same person that not long ago was telling you that you should just emulate because your experience will be better. I think the best way to play Majora's Mask is sell a recompiled pair with a narrow texture pack, which is far from an authentic experience. But hey, you may be saying, didn't you just say that the outdated aspects of the game are part of its identity? Yes, I did, but that doesn't negate that you can still work on older games to make them more fun to play. And this is why I love remasters, official and unofficial, because they fundamentally will be the same game with some enhancements. It's not trying to replace the original, it's simply a new, more accessible way to play the same game. When I talked of the C-targeting before, I didn't mean that as a sacred mechanic that shall not be touched. What I mean is that it shouldn't be a deal breaker for you. There is always safe space to enhance any game. Better performance, higher resolution, maybe a better translation. This is all great and should be encouraged, and when a remaster is done well, be it by fans or official means, it can easily become the definitive way to experience that original game. But a remake is not a way to experience that original game, because a remake is not that original game, and it shouldn't be. When a game is remade, it should have a clear purpose, a different vision, a new objective, a genuine desire to take that original concept to make something new. Because there are two main types of remakes. The quick and easy remake, which is the same game, same gameplay style, same everything, just with modern graphics. The second type is the complete reimagining. New gameplay, different dialogue, maybe some changes in the story. Fundamentally, new game based on an older one. And you might be surprised to hear this, but I vastly prefer the second choice, because a direct graphics update remake is such a wasted opportunity. At that point, you're admitting that the game you're remaking doesn't need to be remade, you just want to have shinier graphics with it. And pretty graphics are fine, but if a PS2 game looking like a PS2 game is enough to keep you from playing, you should try growing up. And these remakes, even when they're meant to be one-to-one and as authentic as possible to the original, a lot of the time they have a completely different artistic direction. A common occurrence with these is taking older games that have a darker, dirtier look and making them look clean and shiny, or just changing the original color palette the game was made for. And with examples like this, you really can tell that the teams making these games are mostly trying to recreate something that they may not fully understand. But discrepancies like these cease to be an issue when you have a complete reimagining of the game. The Raccoon City police station having such a different atmosphere in the remake isn't much of a problem when the entire rest of the game has a different aim. It's not trying to be the same as the original once was, but to be an equivalent recreation of it for this different game. I can accept Leonac's different and for remake, because the tone and presentation of this game is clearly its own thing. The remake wants to be a bit more serious, a bit more grounded, less giant Spanish guy mech and more Spanish scientist seeks redemption. And what makes this all better better is that in this case, the original RE4 is one of the most available games ever. Pretty much every single home console that's come out since RE4 released has had a version of it. It's still being sold and you can get it without much hassle. So this is the best case scenario for a remake existing. Not only does it do its own thing and understands that since it will be a different experience, it doesn't make sense to try and replace the original, but the original is also available for a reasonable price, right alongside it. And this is something I believe most people can agree on. Preservation of art is important, but games are a bitch to preserve because a lot of them were made for very specific hardware, and if they never receive a port or re-release, they may be lost to time forever. Like those old Sega Channel games that were completely lost to time because they were never released physically and nobody backed up the ROMs. And you all know I love emulation, but if we're talking official means, before you even ask for a video game to be remade, you should always ask for it to be preserved, be it with a PC port or a modern release. Did you know that you can't buy the original Crash Bandicoot games through any official means anywhere since the closure of the PS3 online store? But don't you worry, you can buy the remake of it with the Insane Trilogy. There's no need to present the original one because the better modern version is right here. We shit a lot on Nintendo, and rightfully so, but they have been one of the best gaming companies when it comes to offering their older games, even when they already remade them. Nintendo has an awesome track record of remakes, mostly because not only are they all great, but they weren't made just because, ooh, the game is old, but each of them had a clear purpose, be it to make the first chapter of the franchise's story understandable without reading a manual, as a great compilation of enhanced classic games, or to showcase how the gimmick of your new portable console can greatly benefit already existing adventures. Sure, Ocarina of Time 3D qualifies as a quick and easy remake since the game design is pretty much identical, but they didn't just make the graphics better, they understood when they could make enhancements so the game flows better, and when to keep things the same, which leads to Ocarina of Time 3D feeling like the definitive version of the game. It keeps the tone, characters, story, and presentation mostly intact, while also being an awesome upgrade. It doesn't come from a place of wanting to replace that old crappy game, but just to show how good it was from the start. Too bad you can't buy it anywhere. This is really a weird case in which the original game is very easy to get. It was released for the Wii and Wii U virtual consoles, and nowadays you can play it on the Switch Online app, but you can't buy the 3D version of it anywhere, which on one hand shows that Nintendo is not ashamed of the original game and has no intention of replacing it, but also, I'd like all versions to be accessible, even the bad ones. Yeah, this conversation has come from a base assumption that a remake is at the very least just as good as their original counterpart, even if the game looks different. If you played Metal Gear Solid Delta, you played MGS3. But there are times when remakes are just terrible. Metal Gear Solid: The Twin Snakes was released for the Nintendo GameCube in 2004, 6 years after the PS1 game and with barely any involvement from the original creators. While some of his suggestions may or may not have resulted in interesting choices, the result is baffling. It's partly a straight conversion, all the rooms are almost the same, barring a locker here or a trench there, and the story is similar, characters are all the same, albeit a lot more on paper, it's MGS1, but the characters have working eyes and mouths, and Snake can move like he did in the second game. But nothing was done to make the mechanics of 2 mesh better with 1 from both the gameplay and a story perspective, especially compared to the first game. The original game had this clear message about how messed up it was that we enjoyed and seeked out violence, since it is impossible to beat it without killing at least the game's bosses. But in here, you're giving a tranquilizer gun, which wasn't in the original game. This gun lets you eliminate most enemies without killing them, so this message,
"You enjoy all the killing, that's why,"
can just not be true depending on how you play. Speaking of shooting, the first-person aiming, which the original game was not designed to accommodate, breaks the whole game in half. Speaking of breaking, the cutscenes are also very different, being all anime Matrix action scenes that turn almost every scene into a joke. Maybe that's what the intention was, as the music is at best a pale imitation of the original, and at worst straight up bad or even silly. This game marketed itself as the definitive version of MGS1, but it really is telling when the creator of the series, Hideo Kojima, likes to pretend it doesn't exist while talking about how to remake Metal Gear Solid, and Konami has never re-released this game or even referenced it, almost as if they're ashamed of it. But yes, even though I greatly dislike this game, I still believe it should be made accessible for whoever is willing to play it, even if it's just historical curiosity. And because I can't seem to go a single video without mentioning it, Nier Replicant version 1. It's a very interesting case, because in one hand, it's basically a one-to-one recreation of the original, right? Well, aside from the obvious graphical update, they went back and added scenes that they had cut from the original game thanks to budget and time limitations, including a completely new ending that perfectly bridges the gap between this game and its sequel. This is the game that they always wanted to make, but they just couldn't at the time, and the title is a clear showcase of it. Not a Nier remake or Nier Replicant remastered, but simply a new version of it, almost like a really big game patch. patch 1.224744871139. But what happens when a team that worked on a game firmly believes that with the new advances in technology, free of their constraints of their older hardware, decides to go back and remake one of their most important works? In that case, you get something like the Resident Evil remake, often considered one of, if not the best remake ever made. This is a remake that deeply understands every aspect of the original game, improves on practically everything while still having its own style. While the original Resident Evil was going for a sort of low-budget horror action-y film you'd rent at Blockbuster out of curiosity, this remake is sleeker, more somber. It takes its time to build up tension and very slowly reveals its cards. And whilst I struggle to name a single aspect in which the original game is better, I can still confidently say that the PS1 experience is worth having. So whilst a lot of people could rightfully say that the remake fully replaces the original, I say that if you loved one of them, you're guaranteed to at least enjoy the other one. Because as amazing as the remake is, as good as it looks and how it hasn't aged a single day in its art direction and game design, it still just is a different version of that original concept. But you know what also evolves the original concept of a game? A good old-fashioned sequel. Sequels are not bound by sticking to a pre-established story or setting, and they can freely introduce new mechanics, characters, and places to go to. Imagine if instead of getting Red Dead Redemption 2, we just got a remake of the first game. You wouldn't have the story of Arthur Morgan and his band of outlaws. So let old games be old, appreciate them for what they are, and if you think a game has room for improvement, the best thing you could ever ask for is a sequel. So what's the conclusion here? Well, number one is that no game should be made without purpose, and that applies doubly to remakes. If you're gonna make the same game twice, you should really think about why you're doing it, and if you're adding something that we didn't have before. Number two, go try new things. If you've heard a lot of praise for an older game, go try it, even if it doesn't click with you. At least you experienced it and can make an informed statement on whether or not it was for you. And number three, remakes are fine, but sequels are better. When a remake is already available, that's probably the version I'll choose to play. If anything, because I appreciate the convenience, I'm not immune to pretty graphics, but at the same time, we as the people who pay for these things really need to be careful about what message we send to the companies who make them. Do we really want more remakes? Or do we want our franchises to keep going and evolve along the way? Because as nice as it is to have our favorite older games look and play better, well, that's what new games are for, right? Because at the end of the day, no game needs a remake.
I hate remakes and remasters because old is good and new is bad, except when old is bad but I like it. Nothing like an accidental throat slit in Snake Eater really to get me going. My knees are particularly weak. A simple tap of the stick really gets me to lay down. Let me redo that. A simple tap of the stick makes me lay down to remedy my weak knees.
Who the fuck are you?